Hi, I'm Christine McDonald from Rushing River Apiaries. Today we're going to talk about everything you need to know to get started with beekeeping. And my intention today is really to help you decide if beekeeping is a hobby that you are ready to take on and that you really want to take on. What we're going to talk about today are some pieces of intention and mindset that I feel are really important for people who are just beginning in this new hobby. We're going to talk about the time commitment that it takes to properly care for your bees, as well as the space requirements and where you might consider placing them in your yard. We're going to talk about interactions with kids, pets, and neighbors and how you can kind of mitigate those interactions. We're going to talk about the equipment involved, not in great detail, but enough to give you an idea of the upfront costs for getting started with bees. I'm going to touch on some things that you should consider with respect to bylaws and regulations. And then, if you're still with me and still keen, we're going to talk about the things that you need to do between now and spring when you finally get those first bees. So, to begin, I really like to start off by sharing that there are better ways to save the bees than becoming a beekeeper. So, if your number one intention with taking on beekeeping is to help save the bees, then I would like you to consider that honeybees are not really the bees that need saving. Honeybees are very well managed across the world by beekeepers. It requires a lot of beekeeper intervention to keep them healthy. And by all means, there are a lot of things that are trying to kill honeybees. But it's native pollinators, native bees, most of which are solitary, that are really at the greatest risk. And the best ways to get involved with saving the bees is to plant flowers, to leave wild spaces in your yards, and to really think carefully about where you are purchasing food and from whom. So, if you're still with me and you're into beekeeping for some of the other benefits of keeping bees themselves, pollination, honey, all the other amazing hive products that you can get from bees, then we'll continue. The other mindset piece that I like to emphasize is that it is a long-term learning experience. I hope that you will start off by taking some sort of education course or reading some books, but that's really only the beginning. Beekeepers who have been beekeeping for decades are still constantly learning, not only because the bees keep surprising us, but also because new information comes out as bees continue to be researched, and especially as different diseases and pests start to challenge us. So getting into beekeeping, I hope, means that you're also willing to put in the time and effort to join that continuous learning experience, and also that you're willing to try again if you fail. Just like with any other animal you keep, death is a part of beekeeping. You will eventually lose a colony, and it will be devastating, but hopefully there will be things that you can learn and apply so that your colonies from then on have a better chance of thriving with you. As far as the time commitment, beekeeping is very seasonal. Right now it's January and I'm not doing a whole lot with my bees. In the winter, bees are very hands-off. We occasionally go out and heft the boxes to make sure there's lots of honey weight still in them, but otherwise we're not actively beekeeping during the winter months. And those months are going to kind of depend a lot on where you are in the world and what your seasons look like. For us, I'm in northwestern British Columbia. Our bee season, when the bees are actually active and flying, is from about mid-March, really beginning more around April 1st until the end of September. Those are the times of year when we're actively beekeeping, when the bees are out flying. So during those months, we're doing hive inspections approximately every 7 to 14 days. So you want to get into your hive about once a week, once every 2 weeks at some kind of slower times of the summer. And one of those hive inspections for a hive takes about an hour. That includes the time for you to gather your supplies and suit up and start your smoker and go through your hive. And you can certainly speed that up with practice as you get used to finding exactly what you want to see inside your hive. And then in addition to that, there is the time commitment to learning and especially to troubleshooting as problems come up in your hive and they need intervention to solve them. Now, having bees in your backyard, depending on the size of your backyard, might mean that there's going to be some interactions with kids and pets. And I don't say this to scare you. We live on a small urban lot. Most of our hives are hosted on rural properties, but we enjoy having bees around. So we have 3 hives in our small urban backyard. They're about 30 feet away from the kids' trampoline and about 30 feet in the other direction from their play area, and they're smack in the middle of our garden. So it is possible to have bees in a small space where there are also kids and pets. Bees don't generally hang out around their hive. The beeline is kind of a common expression for a reason. When bees leave their hive, they are on a mission and they are headed out to find a food source. The trouble can happen when a child is in that beeline. That's where an interaction happens. And it's not that the bee is going to sting that child, it's just that they can literally be running into them. There are ways to mitigate that. We have just turned our hive backwards so that our bees fly into the fence, and that kind of forces them up and out of the yard. Now, your hive's temperament can vary a lot from hives of your friends or neighbors or other beekeepers, or the hive you had last year versus the hive you have this year. There are happy, gentle, calm hives, and there are spicy, we like to call them, hives. You should never be afraid of the bees in your backyard. And even when you're opening the hive and working with your bees, you should never feel afraid of them. If you have a hive that is defensive enough that it is making you fearful, it's as easy as changing the genetics and replacing the queen. And a new queen will bring her own kind of genetics to that colony. And usually you'll see a nice shift in temperament with that. Fencing can also help. I mentioned that we turned our yard, our beehives around so that they fly out into the fence. You might also put a little trellis in front of the hives, and that will not only help force the bees up and out, but it will also keep that interaction down from pets or children approaching the front of the hive. Kids also make great beekeepers. That photo is of my 2 children holding frames full of bees. Bees are curious. I'm sorry, children. Children are curious. They are gentle. They help us kind of slow down and really experience our bees in a different way when our kids are helping us. So if you have children, get them a bee suit, get them involved, and I am sure that they're going to love it too. Now, as far as space and placement, you really don't need a whole lot of room to keep bees. I mentioned that we keep 3 hives in our small urban garden. That's what you see in the picture there. There are bees on rooftops in New York City and on balconies in Los Angeles. You can keep bees anywhere, and for the most part, the bees are going to go out and find what they need. You don't have to have enough flowers planted around them to support your hive. They are going to go out and find food and water for themselves. We talked about considering interference with kids, pets, and neighbors, but the real takeaway that I want you to have is that there's always a way. It just takes a little bit of creativity and problem solving to find a way that you can have bees in that space while minimizing the interference. Now, in general, full sun is best for your bee colonies. It would be difficult in a very dark shaded yard that doesn't get daylight sun hours to have a thriving colony. So you want to look at your backyard. We actually say at noon on the winter solstice, an area that's in full sun at that time is going to be your best placement for the full year. You also need to consider protection from bears and other pests. So in our area, we have a lot of bears. That means that every bee yard has an electric bear fence around it. Your pests may vary. Skunks like to get into beehives, raccoons, porcupines, possums, ants can get into hives, mice. All of those things, you might need to employ little strategies to help keep them out of the hives. Now, this one is going to be very location specific, but what I want to let you know is that most municipalities will have a beekeeping bylaw. It's very important to know what yours is, especially if you have neighbors who might not be excited about the prospect of bees. I will tell you, though, that our neighbors were quite wary at first, and as soon as we gifted them the first jars of honey, everyone decided that the bees were okay. Most provincial or state governments also require you to register your hives so that they know where you are. That registry helps them contact you if there are outbreaks of some of the more contagious bee diseases in the area. And usually that comes with the opportunity to have an inspector come and visit your hives, either if you see a problem or if you are considering selling bees to other people, then they can come and do a full health check on your bees and kind of give you the seal of approval that your bees are in good health. A really good place to start is by finding your nearest beekeeping club or association. There is one covering almost every region. So I would encourage you to just Google either your city, country, state, or province, plus the words beekeeping association, and you're going to find it. So let's talk about the equipment and costs, because I often hear that, wouldn't it be great to have bees for all of that free honey? And let me tell you, there is no such thing as free honey. The equipment to get started is rather expensive. The most common type of equipment is called Langstroth. That's the hive setup that you see in the picture there. That's what most beekeepers in North America use. It's very beginner friendly. Just a quick note on purchasing used equipment, that it's a really good idea to ask for your state or provincial inspector to check out that equipment before you buy it, to make sure that it's not carrying any diseases. There are several honeybee diseases that can live in the wood or in the beeswax that might still be in that colony. Or at the very least, ask the beekeeper who is selling their stuff what happened to their hives, and make sure that you're comfortable with the equipment that you're bringing in to your own bees. So the equipment that you need, you're going to need some kind of setup of personal protective equipment. That's like the clothing we wear to protect us from stings. I usually recommend a full bee suit for beginning beekeepers. That's still what I wear for 90% of my beekeeping, that protects you from head to ankles to wrists. You can also add gloves, and the gloves, beekeeping gloves, are quite long. They come right up to your elbow to prevent any bees getting in gaps. And there is often a hood that zips right around your face. So there's no gaps for bees to find their way into. A less expensive option, kind of like one step down, would just be to have a jacket. So you're wearing whatever pants you want underneath, and then wearing a bee jacket that again has this integrated face protection. Or you can get just the face protection, and that's called a veil. And you might choose to pair that with gloves as well. So there's lots of options to suit your personal preferences and budget when it comes to personal protective equipment. As far as just the tools, there's not a whole lot. You really only need a smoker, a hive tool, and a brush. Those are kind of the things you see in the bottom photo there with the gloves. It's minimal equipment. Really, the bulk of your cost is coming from the hive body itself. You will find, if you're looking at beekeeping supply shops, beginner packages. They can be a good way to get started. I do have my own list of what I recommend people start out with, and I'm happy to send that to you if you send me a message through Instagram or email. I'll send you my list. Sometimes the beginner packages have some unnecessary items that are just a bit of a waste. I also would caution you not to buy your beginner package through Amazon. There are a few beekeeping things you can get through Amazon once you get to know the brand names to look for, but there is also a whole lot of junk on there. And you don't want to be starting out with equipment that isn't going to last you through several seasons. Now, as far as how bees are bought and sold, there's two real manners. One is called a nuke, and nuke is short for nucleus colony, and it's basically just like a mini colony of bees. The bees come in a little box, and they're already on frames, which means they have already built comb. They've built up all the wax, and in that comb, there is already brood. That's like a generation of baby bees. There is already pollen stored to feed that brood, and there's already honey stores to feed all of the workers that are taking care of that brood, and a queen. So they are already really self-sufficient. And when you put them in your hive, all they have to do is grow outward. Nukes tend to be the more expensive option because you're getting that little bit of a head start of having all those built frames and resources available for the colony. The other option is called a package. And a package is literally just a box with a bunch of loose bees in it. It will also come with a queen, but often the queen is not already familiar to those bees. It's a queen that is brought in from another colony or a queen rearing operation. Those bees, you quite honestly just shake them into an empty hive, and they have to do all of that work of building the wax comb before they can start to collect and store food and before they can start to raise the next generation of brood. So packages tend to be a little bit slower to get going, especially when it's going into brand new equipment. Eventually, you are going to need some kind of extraction equipment. That's what we use to actually get the honey out of the comb. That can be a year or two down the road. In your first year, we tend to tell beekeepers not to expect a honey harvest. Usually you'll get a couple jars, but most of that work and resource is going to stay for the bees over the winter to get them through their first year. Extraction equipment, again, there is a huge range of options. There are ways to DIY a lot of it at home, and that's something that you can explore kind of once you've already got your hive established and you're starting to think about honey. The other real running cost with bees is bee feed. So there are times that you will need to feed your bees. We feed them plain Rogers sugar. That's what it is in Canada. I'm actually not sure in the US, but like plain white sugar from the grocery store, mixed in with warm water to make a really simple sugar syrup. So you'll be purchasing that. There are pollen substitutes that you will probably occasionally purchase, and then treatments for the varroa mite. Those will be a kind of ongoing little costs throughout the year. To give a real ballpark, and again, this is going to vary hugely depending on where you are, but in our area, we say that you should count on $1,000 to start a hive. That's going to include the gear that I've talked about here and the bees to get your first colony established. So if you're still with me and you want bees, here are the things that you need to do between now and spring. So typically, I keep saying spring because spring is when we buy and sell bees. You want to establish your colony first thing in the spring so that it has that whole summer period to build up and be ready to survive its first winter with you. So we look up in this area at May as kind of get bee season. If you're further south, then you might be looking at April. You don't really want to be starting your first hive much later than the first weeks of June. if you're anywhere in kind of a temperate climate where you're going to have a winter. So what you need to do, you need to get on someone's list right away. Usually bees are pre-sold starting around the holiday season. By January or February, you want to be on somebody's list. Direct from beekeeper is best. If you can find a local beekeeper who is selling bees, it's really nice to form a relationship with that person versus just ordering them from a big shop that gets their bees from all over and you're not really sure of their origin. But again, the important thing is to know that they're coming from someone that you trust, whether that's a bigger business or a local beekeeper, so that you know you're getting them in good health. You can ask for inspection reports on the source of the bees, and they should be able to provide that an inspector has checked them and that they are free of disease. You also should register for a bee course, and here comes the shameless plug. I have just released a virtual self-paced beginner beekeeping course called Beekeeping with Confidence that is meant to set you up for a very successful first year and beyond in beekeeping. Please send me a message and I will shoot you the link to that course. If you're in the Terrace area, I also have a live course coming up in February. And start reading and learning for yourself. And this can be even beyond the course. There are tons of good resources out there. My personal favorite book to recommend to beginning beekeepers is Beekeeping for Dummies. I don't love the series name, but it is an excellent resource that we still keep a copy of and refer back to often. And if you're looking for video online learning, then the University of Guelph Honeybee Research Center is a fantastic resource and has a full playlist of beginner beekeeper videos that you can check out. So thank you so much for watching. I hope that this has answered some of your questions about beekeeping, that I haven't scared you off. And I look forward to hearing how you and your bees are doing once you get them set up.